friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 4 of my 2020 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Sunny Studios retro ornaments and classy Christmas. So this card is going to be a bit different for me today since it will not have any Copic coloring. We're just going to be doing some stamping with a bunch of different colored inks. All of the images in this set are a multi-step stamp. And so this first one that I'm doing is going to be with Lawn Fawn's Lobster ink. So I'm making sure to ink that up really well, and then I'm grabbing my Pink and Main microfiber cloth to just rub over the surface of my MISTI to make sure I get a nice even pressure. And then I'll stamp that down one more time so I get a nice bold impression. So before I do the second part of the first ornament, I'm actually going to move on to my second one, and for that one I'm using plastic flamingo ink. So I'm just going to repeat that process, go ahead and ink that up really good. And for whatever reason, this one did not want to hold the ink. That happens a lot with brand new stamps. You can kind of see that it's just beading up on the surface of the stamp, and that's just a little residue from the manufacturer that kind of just is on there. So I took my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois and wiped that off, and then I used the Picket Fence Studios stamp scrubby, and then you can see I was able to ink that up and get a really nice impression. I like both of these tools for different reasons. I feel like the stamp chamois just is so good at removing ink from the surface of your stamps, and then the scrubby, because it has that texture to it, it just roughs it up a little bit and makes it easier for the ink to grip the surface of the stamp. So for this third one, I'm using Lawn Fawn's Peacock ink, and I'm going to stamp that out twice again. And then I'm going to take the second part of each of these ornaments, and I'm going to line it up right over top of the first one. So I'll do the red one, which has that really pretty crosshatch pattern, and then I've got the pink one with the stripes, and then the turquoise one has the top image. So I'm just lining those up, and then I'm going to close the door of my MISTI so I can pick up all 3 of those at once. And I'm going to ink those up with some Versamark ink. And that's just a clear sticky ink that works great for adhering embossing powder to, so that you can heat set it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to treat the surface of my cardstock with a powder tool from EK Success just to make sure that the powder doesn't go where I don't want it. And then I'll close the door of my MISTI and stamp down all 3 of those images at once. And then I'm going to use some super fine silver pearl embossing powder from Wow. So I'm going to coat the top of each of those ornaments with that. And I did get a little bit of extra cling on the bottom of the turquoise one, but I just took a paintbrush and brushed most of that off. I didn't mind if a little bit still stuck because it is just that pearl embossing powder, so it's kind of clear. So I'm going to heat set that first from the back and then from the front until it's all melted and glossy. And I just love the effect that this gives. It looks really cool, especially when you tip it in the light. So then I'm going to pop these back in my MISTI so that I can line up the top part of the ornament. The stamp set has 2 in the set, so I'm going to do the first 2 and then I'll stamp the third one separately. So I'm just using Versamark ink once again. So I'll clean those off with my stamp chamois, and then I'll take one more and line it up over top of the third ornament and stamp that out. And this time I'm going to coat these images with some liquid platinum embossing powder from Ranger. So I'm going to have lots of shine on today's card. So I'm just going to spoon that over the top so that I get the embossing powder just where I want it. And then I'll bring my heat gun to that as well. And I love the way this one looks too when it melts. It's just so pretty when it takes on that silvery platinum sheen. So I just like to keep my heat gun moving so that it's not in one place for too long, and there you can see that sparkle when it catches the light. So now I've got another piece of white cardstock, and I'm taking the little pine boughs from Classy Christmas, and I'm going to stamp those in jalapeno and noble fir ink from Lawn Fawn. So I'm starting with the furthest one to the right, and then I'm going to work my way back to the left. That way I can overlap just a little bit and make sure to kind of cover all of the little stems. So next time I'm going to stamp 2 of those images, and these I'm going to do with the jalapeno, just cleaning off those images once again, and then inking those up and pressing those down. Now for these, I'm just going to do the one stamp. I'm not going to do it multiple times just because they're going to be over on top of each other anyway. So, plus I feel like the thinner line images, it doesn't show as much if it's not like a perfect impression. So I'm just going to continue moving these back, and I'll do, occasionally I'll do 2 images, and sometimes I'll just do 1 and kind of fill in that space. I decided to switch to just the jalapeno now, and then I'll come back and fill in the noble fir in the empty spaces. So I have to tell you guys, this was the stamp set that I was the most nervous about using from the Sunny Studio new release. I don't know why, I was just really intimidated by it, but I end up really loving how this card turned out, so I'm glad that I stepped out of my comfort zone and tried something a little bit different. And it was kind of fun to just play with inks for a change. So what do you guys think? Are you a fan of these multi-step images, or are you intimidated by them like I am? And if you are, I'm happy to report they were much easier to work with than I originally thought. So I finished up stamping with the noble fir, and now I wanted to add a few more embossed branches. So I'm going to lay those out one more time and pick them up with the door and stamp those out in some Versamark ink. And I'm going to treat the surface of that cardstock. My thing is clogged, so I just opened it up and dumped a little bit of that powder out. And then I'm going to spread that around with the nozzle, and then I'll stamp down those images. And I'm going to coat those in the silver pearl embossing powder. So again, these branches are going to be more subtle on the card, but you'll really see them when you tip it into the light. So I did 2 this first go round because there were only 2 of those images, but I am going to add a 3rd in the top left corner, and then I'll heat set those with my heat gun once again. I always like to make sure that it's nice and hot when I bring it to the paper too. I'll let it run off to the side for maybe 30 seconds and get that nice and heated up. And there you can see how those catch the light. So now I'm going to grab the coordinating dies and line those up over top of the images. I'm going to hold the dies in place with a little bit of Post-it tape and run that through my die cut machine. Now the circles are the same size, so there's just 1 die for those, so I did them 1 at a time. But it even takes out the little hole in the center at the top, so you could thread some string or something through that if you wanted to. This one didn't want to come out, so I just grabbed my craft pick to poke that out. And now I'm going to line those up on my card base so that I can figure out the positioning for the cords. I'm actually going to stamp the ones that are included in the set. There's a couple different ones, but I'm going to do this long one that looks kind of beaded. So I'm going to line that up with the image, and then I'm going to press down the door of my MISTI to pick it up, and I will stamp those in Versamark ink as well. And to prevent that string from stamping all the way to the top of the panel, I'm just going to use the same piece of cardstock that I die cut my images out of, and that will just stop that Versamark ink from getting all over the top where I don't want it. And I realized that that bar magnet was getting in the way of getting a good impression, so I just slid that up and then re-stamped that. For these chains, I'm going back to the liquid platinum embossing powder, and I just thought that that would look really pretty, kind of like they were silvery chains. So I will coat that with the embossing powder, tap off any excess, and then heat set them and then go on to the next one, and that way I won't worry about having any of that embossing powder brush off in the meantime while I line them up. So I'm going to do the other two off screen just to save some time in the video, since this is pretty repetitive with the different steps. So once those are done, I'm going to take one of the slimline basic borders and I'm going to trim off the right hand side of the card. So I just taped that in place with some more post-it tape and ran that through my die cutting machine, and then I'll just pop out any of those little pieces that got stuck inside. And I really love that decorative edge that it gives it. So now I'll pop that back into my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment. I needed to know where I was going to cut so that I could justify it to the right hand side. So I'm stamping with my Versamark ink again, and I'm going to emboss that with the liquid platinum embossing powder, so it will have the same shine as the chains, and it'll also show up really nicely on the card. And that sentiment is from the Inside Greetings Holiday stamp set. So I just made sure to coat that really well so that the sentiment is very legible. And then I'll bring that to my heat gun once again and melt it until it's nice and bright and shiny. And because I'm going to be using a darker colored card base, I decided to do an insert for the inside of my card. So I'm using Lawn Fawn's Lobster ink to stamp Merry Christmas and a few little sparkle marks from the Retro Ornaments stamp set. And then I'm going to glue that to the inside of a Lawn Fawn chili pepper card base. So I'll just smooth that down on the inside, and then I'll take my focal panel and I'm going to line that up so that there's just a sliver of that red cardstock showing on the left, and then you've got a little bit more showing through that beautiful scallop over on the right. I've added some foam tape to the back of the ornaments so that they'll be popped up and have a little bit of dimension. So I'm just lining them up on the card, and then I can start to peel off those release papers and set them down into place right where I wanted them. So I wanted the turquoise and the pink ornament to kind of block in that sentiment in the lower right corner, just so your eye is really drawn to it. And then that red one has such a nice bright pop of Christmassy red over on the left. So I'm just lining that up so it's nice and straight, and then pressing that down into place. I couldn't decide on the exact placement of that one. It took me a little bit to get it situated, but once I was happy with it, I pressed that down. So I'll pick that up and tip it into the light so you can see how shiny that is. I love how that embossing powder turned out, and there's another look at the inside. And that is going to complete my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed day 4 of my 2020 holiday card series. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you'd like to check out any of the products that I used today, those are all listed and linked below the video. If you'd like to keep watching, here is day 4 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.